Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, regardless of where you are. Everybody's welcome for another one of our lectures in the talk series promoted by the United Spiritist Federation. These lectures they are presented live every Saturday morning at 11 U.S. Standard Eastern Time. So we're very happy here to host this talk by Álvaro Mordechai. So we'll be leading our live, and today's topic is reincarnation in ancient times. So before we dive into this very interesting topic, hey Alvaro, how are you? Welcome.
Hello, I'm very happy to be here for this opportunity of this talk in English about reincarnation in ancient times.
And so are we. Before we get to your lecture, which I mean, I'm very curious about it, by the way. So two announcements. The first one is that we have the initiation of Spiritism virtual course. The presentations are every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern, and it is meant for those who want to learn or review. So it's not just that you want to learn, but also if you want to reinforce and review the basic principles of Spiritism. And of course, we have the 25th anniversary of the United States Spiritist Federation. We're going to celebrate it together as part of the 16th U.S. Symposium in Houston, Texas, on November 5th. So the theme of the symposium will be time for renewal, healing, and regrowth. So the symposiums of our whole family. So there are going to be also sessions for children and teenagers. And if you're interested, if you want to learn more about the symposium, visit spiritistsymposium.org. And registration is open already. And one more announcement before we move on. On the screen here, you're gonna see there is a QR code, and if you want to help the United States Spirit Federation produce more publications and promote Spiritism to everyone, you can scan this QR code on the screen and make a donation and help us continue offering these kind of quality lectures and also publications and all the other efforts that the United States Federation promotes. Alvaro, back to you. So, I mean, it's very nice to have you here in this live broadcast. And again, it's good for us to discuss about reincarnation in ancient times. So a little bit about you, Alvaro Mordechai. You are a Spiritist speaker, and pretty much you talk about your studies, right? About the Old Testament. And I see here that you speak Hebrew fluently. That's amazing. Amongst other languages, of course, English included. Your English is excellent, and you learned and studied Jewish laws, customs through the years, and you lived in Jerusalem. That's very interesting. And you aim to combine the knowledge and interpretation of the Bible's sacred texts through the wisdom of Jewish people. Very interesting, with the gospel of Jesus under the light of Spiritism. So you offer the combination of the three revelations. And pretty much you give lectures in conference in Brazil and abroad. Alvaro Mordechai is also a promoter and coordinator of the group trips of the humanitarian organization Fraternity Without Borders, and we're eager to hear from you, Alvaro. Of course, you have a very busy schedule, so we appreciate you being with us. And yeah, without further ado, please talk to us about reincarnation in ancient times.
Yeah, okay. So this subject it's very interesting. And for some of us, we might think or when we first heard about spiritism or about reincarnation, we could think that this is something new. And actually, this is what Dr. Bezerra de Menezes, that he was a great spiritist, he was a very important person in the history of spiritism in Brazil. And this is what he said, that the first time he heard about reincarnation, it would sound a little bit strange in a first moment. Although when he started studying, he understood that the inner of his soul, all that knowledge, that spiritual knowledge, it was making a great sense. So if we do have the roots of our spirituality, of our religion in the Western Hemisphere, it will be natural that sometimes in the beginning it would sound as something new, intellectually talking, especially because we will see that in the Council of Constantinople in the year 553, it was forbidden to talk and to the propagation of the reincarnation. So it becomes a dogma of the Catholic Church. So today we're going to make a journey in the history of humanity, and this journey will be with the light of the Spiritism, of course, and through the light of the Spiritism, we will try to go on in Egypt civilization. A little bit we will talk about the ancient Greeks and the people of Israel. And today we're going to start this journey through the chapter 14, verse number 2 of John's Gospel. And in this verse, Jesus said, "In my Father's house there are many mansions." And according to the knowledge of the Spiritism, we know, we understand that we can have, spirits can have different incarnations in different worlds. And according to the Gospels of to the Spiritism, we can read and we can understand that the conditions of various words differs one to another according to the degree of elevation or the degree of inferiority of their inhabitants. So we understand, pedagogically saying, that there will be 5 different levels of words. First of all, we will find the primitive words, where the human soul is starting the initial stages of incarnation. After this, we will find words of tests and atonements, and this is where evils it predominates in these planets over their spirits. And this is the exactly case of planet Earth nowadays. We will find regenerating words. These are words where souls who still are in these planets are starting to have more goodness, even though they still atone on these words. They goodness starts to make higher perform among these spirits. And we will find blessed words after this. And these blessed words, it's where goodness outweighs the evil. And the last one, the most evoluted planets, we will find it's the celestial or divine worlds, where these inhabitants are purified spirits, where we just find goodness. So it's very interesting to notice this because we live in a huge universe with many planets. And what Spiritism is trying to bring to us, according to this verse that it's attributed to Jesus, that all these words we have in our universe, we have spiritual life, and actually one word to another, there will be differences on the elevation of these planets. And as much as we see that we are in a spiritual evolution, individually talking, we will see that this evolution will also goes on collectively talking. So these planets, they would have times of transitions, times that a word would go from one stage to a higher stage of evolution. And according to these moments, planetary transitions, we will find that there's a wave of evolution, that all the spirits that are living in these planets, they would need to perform in a moral sense of view a higher elevation. And all those spirits that cannot accomplish the wave, cannot go on the wave of spiritual evolution, what it will happen according to a fluidic affinity, we will see that these spirits were will be compelled to have incarnation in worlds that will be in a lower level of evolution. So what I mean is, when we have the wave of evolution in some world, and for example, like planet Earth, we are living today in a world of tests and atonements, and we are living a planetary transition. This planetary transition, it will take probably hundreds of years, and those spirits that cannot accomplish to go on this wave of spiritual evolution, in this wave of morality evolution, moral evolution, we will see that they will be compelled to have incarnation in words that probably will be primitive words on a wave of evolution to words of tests and atonements. And this is very important for us because, according to the Spiritism, according to what we see in the book On the Way to the Light by the Spirit Emmanuel, this is what happened in the system of Capella. And in the system of Capella, there was a planet on this evolution, the same planetary transition that we are living today. These spirits that couldn't achieve the moral evolution, they were compelled to have their first incarnation on planet Earth thousands and thousands of years ago. So these spirits that they come from an exile from another system, they would perform four different civilizations on ancient times. And the civilizations would be the Egyptians, the Aryans, and the Aryans, they would give the origins for the Sumerians, for the Greeks, the Indians, and the people of Israel. So these four civilizations, they would have a lot in common in one to another, and they would have their exile as a important point in the civilizations. We will start for the Egyptians, and according to what history knows, ancient Egyptian civilizations go over 10,000 years. Although the history can only clearly goes to 5,000 years of knowledge, of understanding, we will see that the ancient Egypt, according to Emmanuel, that on the book On the Way to the Light, they would be a civilization among these other civilizations that were exiled, who stood most for the practice of good and the worship of the truth. When we talk about ancient Egypt, immediately we think about these architectonical monuments, the pyramids, and others. But we will see here, we will emphasize here that this civilization that were on a wave of evolution, technologically, intellectually talking, very much high in the planet that they were living, and they would incarnate in planet Earth, and they would find actually a lot of troubles in their spiritual understanding, because this exile would mark this civilization, and they would have the spiritual understanding of what was happening to them. So they have a desire in the inner of their souls that it was laboring, spiritually talking, to return their previous planet, their previous home. So by this way, these spirits in ancient Egypt, they would create the metempsychosis. And the metempsychosis, it was created because actually they were believing that spirits could return and have incarnation in animal bodies. Of course, we do understand that this was not possible, it's not reasonable, because the Spiritism is teaching to us that the spirits who have progressed cannot regress. So once you have intellectual progress, you cannot forget, you cannot lose this progress that your spirit have. Once you have moral progress, you cannot regress, you cannot lose all this moral progress, all this moral evolution that you have in your spirit. But for the Egyptian, it was a natural feeling because they have a lot of remembrances from this dollar's banishment that they suffer. They have been feeling as has they were being punished, having an incarnation in such a primitive world on that days. So to understand this, I like to figure out, imagine us living in United States of America, and we have a great health system. We have a security in our cities, or mostly. Imagine we have all the technology we do have, like internet and satellites, and we have iPhones, and we have a huge amount of technologies that makes our life much easier. And suddenly we will have an incarnation in a more primitive world. And we still have to develop agriculture, we still have to develop all the technologies and all the civilization status that we were living. So in our remembrances, it would be natural that we will be feeling like we had regressed into an animal condition, as we have incarnation now on an animal body. Actually, this was not happening, but the spiritual feeling for those spirits, it was this spirit that created the metempsychosis. We will find that to the circumstances that we will find these spirits, they have brought with them a knowledge that the times that they were living could not bear. And we are talking about moral evolution, and we are talking also, especially, about intellectual evolution. And what we will find these masters of antiquity that had so much knowledge about spiritual world, that they had a lot of knowledge about reincarnation. They would be compelled to keep their traditions and their knowledge in reserved temples. So we will find a most profound knowledge that was limited for a circle of high priestess in ancient Egypt. We will call these high priest circles the initiates. And the initiates, they would be those who achieved a new level of consciousness and a level of knowledge, spiritual knowledge. And this new level of consciousness and spiritual knowledge would make that they could transform the way they were living in this planet, and they could balance between human passions, material desires, and a spiritual way of living. By these conditions of making the balancement of all these human passions and material desires with the will of evolution, they would achieve a level that they could regress to their natural home, their spiritual homes, because they would achieve a much higher evolution according to the knowledge they would happen. These initiates, they have for them in ancient Egypt civilization the fate of death and the communication with the spirits, the plurality of existences, and the many words that were habitats, they would have this as a problem that has been solved and really well understood. We would find their pictorial arts, their papyrus, with great teachings about the spiritual world. And we will bring here some book, and this is the Egyptian Book of the Dead. And we will find in this book, I will show for a little bit more, one moment more, for those who want to find out afterwards. So in this Egyptian Book of Dead, we will find many papyrus, many pictorial arts that we will teach, and we will show how the ancient Egyptians were understanding in that day the reincarnation. So I will ask John to put the image number 1 for us to see. And this is Anubis. The Anubis, it's an spiritual entity that it has the head of a jackal, and this is a symbolic way of understanding this entity. This Anubis, it's over a dead body, mummified body, and if we think about jackals, what they do at night, we will understand that they go over the night to find dead body of animals, and they would feed themselves through the flesh of these dead body animals. What it will happen in the understanding of the Egyptian mythology is that this spiritual entity would represent entities that goes over dead bodies, those who had just passed away, and they would bring their spirits, their souls to the entrance of the spiritual world. So next image, please. This one is Amit, and she's a spiritual entity that stays in the entrance of the spiritual world, and she has this feather on her head that it's a very important Egyptian symbol. We will see in the next image. Here it's the entrance of the spiritual world. So once Anubis brings you to the entrance of the spiritual world, you could go inside this spiritual world, that it will be the redemption of the soul. If once they would take your heart out from your body, it causes no pain because you are already dead. So uh, once they would take your heart, they will put in the left side of the scale, and the feather that it's in the head of a myth will be on the right side of the scale. By this way, we will understand that if your heart it's it weighs more than the feather, you would have to return planet Earth, and you have to have another incarnation, that you would look the way, you would find out for the ways that your heart would be lighter, and what it would makes that your heart it's heavier or lighter. It's how you deal with your human passions. So if you were very much in touch and actually were a slave of your human passions, then your heart would weigh so much that you have to have this circle of incarnation. You would learn in the incarnation, and then when you achieve the spiritual world, if you learn it how to deal with your human passions, then probably your heart would be lighter. You had evolved your spirit. Once you are in a high degree of evolution, the feather will be much, much heavier than your heart, and you would achieve your redemption, the redemption of your spirit. So you could go to your spiritual home. Here is just because this papyrus is with zoom in. We have here the full papyrus on the next image, and this image it's an important image of this Egyptian Book of Dead. Okay, so we can take the image out. The kings of the ancient Egypt, what we know by pharaohs, they were the one who had the highest degree of initiation. So they have spiritual powers, mediumistic talking, and they had a very great knowledge in their hands. Actually, they have a sacred knowledge in their hands. And we would find out that those exiled souls, they were inspired by the higher helmet spirits, that their time, the time of their civilization, would come to an end. Why? Because those spirits, they were living with many reincarnations in planet Earth, and they were going higher and higher on a spiritual elevation. In some point, they could return their spiritual home. So by this way, the higher helm spirits, they would inspirate those pharaohs or those kings of Egypt that they would have to build huge monuments, the pyramids. And these pyramids, they would be very highly sacred temples for them, where they would transmit their study, their initiation, and where they would have the touch. They would talk to the spirits, and they would have there all the contact with the superior spirits, and they would teach in these places. And this is one of the most important way of seeing the pyramids. But also, Emmanuel will say to us that these pyramids, they would be a book for the posterity, and they would have many prophecies that were in symbols of the pyramids. We will see nowadays that and we will imagine that the pyramids were just tombs for the pharaohs, but actually they were buried there because of the psychosphere of that place. So, what I mean is that in the medieval age, it was natural that people wanted to be buried inside churches because they wanted to be, let's say, closer to God. In this way, the ancient Egyptians, they wanted to be buried inside pyramids because the psychosphere was a very important and very nice place for them. So the build of the pyramids have baffled the engineering for centuries, for many, many, many centuries. But we will find in these pyramids measurements that has symbolic expressions according to the cosmogonic system of our planet. So, for example, we will find the distance from Earth to the Sun. We will find more cosmogonic intellectual knowledge in symbols of the pyramids that just nowadays our science is achieving. So here we will look for the distance for the image number 10, and the most important thing that we will find in the pyramids, it's not just that they have cosmogonic message, but they have also spiritual symbols and spiritual important messages. So here we see the three more important pyramids, that it's Cheops, Khafre, Menkaure, and these biggest pyramids, they are showing that they are pointing to the Orion belt. And in the next image, we will see that they are exactly at the same angle of the Orion belt. And if we were looking from Orion belt from the other side, what we would have there? The system of Capella, their spiritual home. We have the image number, another image. And here we will find the circumpolar stars that this entrance on the right side would would indicate different polar stars. And the polar stars, the circumpolar stars, are stars that are always in the same point. It doesn't matter from where you are looking, it will be always on the same point at night. And this is the message for the eternal life. It will always be there. It doesn't matter in which place of the planet you are, it will always be there. And we will find that they would have the precession, the knowledge of the precession of the equinox, that it's a natural movement that the planet Earth is making every 27,000 years approximately. We will find a new era according to the Egyptians for planet Earth. So when they were in our planet, they have the aquarium era. And nowadays we are moving to a new different era for the ancient Egypts, that is the Pisces era, spiritual era. So every time we move, every 27,000 years, this entrance of the pyramid will be facing, will be indicating a new circumpolar star. So we can take out the image, but even so much important as these cosmogonical signs that we find in the pyramids, we will find also symbolic way of understanding the pyramids. First of all, we have a square base with four sides. It indicates four elements that it would be water, fire, earth, and air. In ancient times, they would believe that all material world were made with different combinations of these four elements. So in the basis, we will have this the symbol of these four elements. We will have four sides of the pyramids, and each side we have a triangle. It means an image with three sides. These three sides, it would indicate for us the spiritual life. So the pyramid wants to show that to accomplish the higher evolution, the ascension of our spirit, the redemption of our spirit, we would have to go on in the evolution and learn how to live with spiritual life, three sides, and the base, four sides, making a completely balance in our life. So we find here this pyramid as an important symbol for the ancient Egyptians, and they would show that actually, when we have the base of the pyramid and we are living in a society, so let's imagine that I'm living in my city, let's imagine I'm living in with my family, or I'm living with my country, or my world, doesn't matter. If you are on the base of the pyramid, you have more space. So let's imagine you have a huge base and you have many people living in this society. You have space between people. If you go up and you go in a higher evolution, you go for the top of the pyramid. So you have the same community, but everybody will have to squeeze one to another. It's actually not squeezing, it's spiritual approaching, it's spiritual understand. It means that you have to be rid of your egoism, to live together with others. So evolution for ancient Egyptians, it would be getting rid of your egoism to approach those who are living in your community, in your family. And in this way, you would be going up to a higher level of evolution. And we will find also that the pyramid, it has an important symbol with the triangle, because the sun rise would start in one side, it goes up to the midday, and then it starts the sunset. And this is the symbol of the reincarnation. For them, every day that they would see the sun going up on a evolution way, in a organic way of thinking, I mean in our physical life, I mean our incarnation, we will be getting old, and then we are gonna die in some point. But in the next day, what they would see, that the sun, it's making the movement of the pyramid once again. So it means that you would have the chance of the reincarnation if you didn't achieve the redemption of your soul. So that's why we will find the scarab, this Egyptian beetle, as a very important symbol for the Egyptians. Because if we see them, I have a movie here, and I will ask to show this movie. We will see that they are. Let's see the movie, and then I explain. We, this scarab that we saw on the move, I will ask you to see it once again, just to notice. We can take out the move. This scarab, it's rolling a piece of physics, and this move I made actually in Africa, and it's rolling a piece of physics. They would believe that the spiritual world, this scarab would represent a spiritual entity that would be responsible for rolling the sun every day to show humanity that we would have the revolving of our souls with many incarnations in this world. Just to know, we have over 140 pyramids in ancient Egypt, and we took over 4,000 years to build a higher monument in planet Earth, that it would be the Cathedral of Lincoln, just in the 16th century. These three more important pyramids, they would be built about 2,700 years before Christ. So here, uh, we understand that for the Egyptians, we have a whole completed spiritual knowledge of the spiritual world, about the reincarnation, about the communication with the spirits. But we will find in this civilization the missing link. And what's the missing link? We will not have all the technologies, especially in magnetism and other technologies that they had even nowadays. After 5,000 years, we cannot achieve yet many of the knowledge they had, scientifically talking, and even in the magnetism. So we find this missing link from this ancient civilization to our civilizations nowadays. So, what is this missing link? This is the understanding that many of these spirits, they have achieved the redemption of their souls, so they had regressed to their natural home, to their spiritual home in Capella. So the missing link is the missing of these spirits that had still nowadays the knowledge in their inner of the spirits that they were living in that days. But what we will see is that Emmanuel will say to us that the mysteries of the Isis and Osiris, and here we are talking about the Egyptian mythology, the secrets of the Egyptian mythology actually had been transformed in the initiation of ancient Greece. So the Greek mythology would have the basis of their knowledge on the Egyptian mythology, of course, with a lack of knowledge, with some representations, but not with such a higher understanding of the spiritual world as the Egyptians had. So we will see that it's written in the Plato's dialogue of Timaeus and Solon of Greece, that Timaeus would say to Solon that comparing to the Egyptians, the Greeks were just small kids. They didn't had such a big knowledge on philosophy, on a spiritual understanding of the world. So by this way, we will see that in the ancient Greek, we will have a lot of important knowledge on reincarnations that would come from this exile, and also from spirits that had reincarnated from Egypt in ancient Greece. So, among this important knowledge, we will find the Pythagoreans, and they were originated on the 6th century before Christ, and the teaching and believing were held by Pythagoras. And for the Greeks, according to the Pythagorean knowledge, spiritual knowledge, the soul was the spirit for the Greeks. And the spirit would be enwrapped in a fluidic ethereal body, so they would understand the ethereal body. And the fate of psyche, it on the human soul, it would be that the spirit would be captivated in flesh and would struggle suffering, and would have a gradual ascension, elevation, a spiritual world. However, this spirit would triumph over human passions. So we do understand that for them, if the human soul would achieve the dead, they would pass away and would not completely be cleared, purified from the human passions. This spirit had to once again reincarnate in planet Earth, and then would need to work out for triumph over human passions. For the Greeks, we will see that the intervention of the spirits on human affairs would happen all the time. All the time. We will see the Socrates' history story, and in his story, he was talking with a familiar genius, a familiar spirit, and this spirit would talk to him and would inspire him and would explain him about the philosophy of life. We will understand that in the history of Socrates, he was condemned to be dead in his time because he was teaching the young people about all this spiritual knowledge and all about this spiritual philosophy. And by this way, he was arrested. When he was arrested, some of his students that didn't understood very well his teachings, they went and they bribed the person who was in charge for the jail where he was arrested, that Socrates could run away. And Socrates explained to them that actually he was a free spirit because he was not a prisoner of his human passions. Actually, those who arrested him were prisoners. So he refused to run away, and he was dead. He was killed and condemned to drink a poison, what he did. But of course, we understand that when he achieves the spiritual world, he was a free spirit because he has lived and he has understood the spiritual reason of the incarnation that he had. We will find also in the history of ancient Greek civilizations a very important moment where the ancient Greeks would have a war with the Persian Empire, the Xerxes Empire, and the Greeks, they would won. They would have victory in this war. And we will see that the triumph that they achieved over the Persians, the history will say that was actually possible because they have an invisible legion of spirits that were helping them in that battle, in that war. So why it would be so important that an invisible legion of spirits would help them in that war? Because the spirituality have invested 2000 years of spiritual knowledge, of spiritual philosophy, of spiritual art for the Greeks. And the Persians in that moment of the history would represent the barbaric Asians that were living in that days. So we can assume that for the Greeks, the reincarnation and the communication and the influence of the spirits were very important in their journey. And now we go for the Judaism, for the people of Israel. And we have to understand that for the people of Israel, the Torah, that is the first five books of Moses, it would be a very important, multi layered interpretation document. So it means that we have many deeper levels of interpretation that are not readily accessible for everybody. So we will find that the Torah will have a very important practical application in our daily lives, but also the understanding of the deeper ways, the deeper layers interpretation, we will see that this would be very important to understand the spiritual life. So if we have friends that are Jews, sometimes we can talk about reincarnation, and some of them can even deny the reincarnation. Why? Because according to the Jewish knowledge, it's not everybody that it's readily read to assess these deeper layers of spiritual interpretation. Although, for sure, the revolving of the soul, what we call Gilgula Neshamot, or the revolving of the sun, or the succession of lives, the Gilgulim, will be an integral part of the Jewish beliefs. The reincarnation will be always around with the Jewish people since the first Jew, Abraham. But it's interesting to notice that the Jewish people will have an oral tradition of transmission of the knowledge. So, in ancient times, we will find the books of Moses and the Old Testament, but we will not find books that will talk very clearly about reincarnation. But with time, some important rabbis of the Judaism, they will write books that will talk more explicitly what it was occult for many of the Jewish people. And one of these very important rabbis, it was Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, Rab Shimon Bar Yochai, and he passed away about 18 centuries ago. And till nowadays, many thousands of Jews every years they pilgrimage to Kfar Meron. It's a city in Israel. It's a small place actually in Israel, and they go there to pray in their tomb because he brought so much knowledge for the Jewish people. And we are talking about the Kabbalah. He brought the Kabbalah and he wrote the book of Zohar, and the book of Zohar will talk about the spiritual life in a much clearer way, although it's very hard even for those who are not studying Judaism for at least 20, 30 years to achieve. For the Jews, this was a great moment in the history. So that's why people still pilgrimage still nowadays every year to Kfar Meron. So Rav Shimon Bar Yochai had his most important teacher as Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, he was a very famous rabbi that during to the cruel persecutions of the Roman Emperor Adrian, he would teach Talmud publicly. He would teach about spiritual life and spiritual laws, and he would talk about the Judaism publicly. And of course, this was forbidden in that days. And those who were teaching Torah and Talmud, they would be sentenced by the penalty of death. So Rabbi Akiva, he didn't stop teaching the Jewish people publicly, publicly, so he was condemned to be dead, and he died as a martyr of the Judaism. And his pupil, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, he would run away for a cave in Kfar Meron, in this place in Israel, with his son Elazar. And according to the story, there would be growing a carob tree in the front of the cave, and also he would have a spring inside the cave, and he would stay there for 12 to 13 years with his son. They would study, they would meditate, and especially they would write. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai would write the book of Zohar, and he would receive this book of Zohar according to the explanations of one very important spirit in the Judaism, that is the prophet Eliyahu. The prophet would come in spirit to inspire him and to explain how he should be writing this book with all the spiritual knowledge of the Jewish people. So this was the first book that we will find that it's talking about spiritual life and spiritual and the reincarnation in the Judaism. After him, we will find a very important rabbi that he was born in the year 1534 and he passed away on the 1572, just with 38 years. His name is Rav Itzhak Luria. He's known by Arizal, and he's the author of the book Shara Gilgulim, the portal of the reincarnations. And this book will explain to us the process of the reincarnation in an even more clear way than the Zohar. But even though it's difficult for those who doesn't has a lot of knowledge on the Judaism, on the Hebrew learning and the scriptures of the Judaism, it will be very difficult to understand all the book. But it was a great evolution for the Judaism, this book, the Shara Gilgulim, the portal of reincarnation, and it would be based on the chapter 21, 22, and 23 of the book of Exodus, the book of Moses. And it's written like this in the chapter 21, verse 1. And these are the laws that you shall place before them, God said to Moses. And it will be understood by Onkelos, another important sage, that these are the laws that you should order before them. So, which laws should be ordered? It's not the laws that are written in the Torah, but it will be written that these are the laws of the reincarnation and the laws of cause and effect and the purpose which we're living in this world, and for achieving our the redemption of our spirit. According to this book, we would have to come multiple reincarnation through this world, and we would learn different lectures of the spiritual evolution till the moment that we would be purified spirits, and then we were ready not to reincarnate here. What's it's very interesting, the Jewish believing and in the lessons of our sages in Judaism, is that there's a guarantee for the Jewish people. We had been on the Har Sinai, in the Mount Sinai, and we have heard to the voice of God. Of course, we understand this in a spiritual way. We are talking here in the symbolic language of the Old Testament. So the people of Israel stayed in Mount Sinai and listened for the teaching of the Ten Commandments of the Jewish people. And the Jewish people received the spiritual Torah So the oral teachings of the Torah in that days, but we had a guarantee that all these teachings that we received that would perform a better way how to live in our family. So we have family laws, we have a lot of teachings of how we should live into our city, how we should deal with judgments, with justice, how we should eat, how we should perform our life in this world. We would have a guarantee in Judaism. What? That we would have more revelations, spiritual revelations, and the spiritual revelations that would come in the future would be revelations from the higher helm spirits that would come to explain how does it works the spiritual life in details with a lot of knowledge. So in this book, Shara Gilgulin, we will find, for example, they questioning if Moses was reincarnation of Abel, and they would say that there were many reincarnations, souls on the history of the Torah, and this was a very important knowledge. And we will find after Arizal, another very important rabbi, and his name is Rav Israel Baal Shem Tov, the master of the name. This is not his real name, but how he became known. Israel Baal Shem Tov. He was born in the year 1698, and he was a very important pious leader of the Jewish people. And he would have divine power, and he would perform a lot of miracles. It's just a way to say that he was a very important medium. He had his mediumistic way of understanding and communicating to the spirits and even healing people because he was known as a folk healer, very well developed. And actually, the healing of the people, he believed that this would come not just with the healing of the body, but bringing relief, bringing hope, and this would be through the spiritual learning, the most way, the biggest way, the greater way of healing masses. So he was the founder of the Hasidic movement, and the Hasidic movement would bring the spiritual dimension of the Judaism for being accessible for everybody who wants to learn about the spiritual understanding of or the spiritual dimension of the Judaism. So Rav Baal Shem Tov would teach that there are three very important pillars if you want to study and understand the spiritual dimension of the Torah. And this would be the love of God, the love of the Torah, and the love of your fellow as yourself. So we will find here a very important story of Rav Baal Shem Tov. And this rabbi once was questioned by Magid, that was also a very important rabbi, that he wanted to understand how the divine providence, how the divine justice would work in this world. So Baal Shem told him, you want to understand divine providence? You should go to a specific place. You will find a tree there. You should climb the tree. You should stay in the upside of the tree, and you should not for any moment, you should not in any moment go and change what you will see. So he had to watch from the top of the tree what it was happening, but he couldn't have an intervention in what he was seeing. So he went to this place, he stayed in the top of the tree. There was a spring down the tree. There was a very nice shadow for those who were traveling to rest. So first comes a man with a horse, and this man stops for drinking water on the spring. He sleeps a little bit in that shadow of the tree. He rests himself, and when he stands up and he goes away, he didn't see, of course, but he forgot a wallet full of money. He goes away. After some point, there will come a second person, and he will see that wallet there. When he sees that wallet, there's no name, there's no identification, so he takes the wallet for him, and he goes away. After some time, there are coming a third man, and he's a beggar. He's very sick. He has suffering right straight. When you look to him, you see that he's a man that is suffering a lot. And he rests under the shadow of that tree. He's drinking a little bit of water. And then the first man that came with his horse and lost the wallet is coming and say, "Where is my wallet? I want to know where is my wallet. You took this." And said, "No, what wallet? I didn't see anything. I just came and there's no wallet here. There was no wallet here." And the first man start beating that man, and he takes him to the jail because he says that he robbed his wallet. The Maggid was in the top of the tree, and he couldn't say anything, and he was just watching all the story. Nothing would happen after this, and he is very actually anxious to understand what happened. How couldn't this be divine providence in this world? And he goes to Baal Shem Tov, and he's furious, and he's saying, "Why this happens? We see a first man that comes and he loses a wallet, a second man finds the wallet, and then a poor man with suffering in his life is in the wrong place at the wrong time, and then the first man comes back, beats him, and takes him to jail. What is divine providence? How is it possible?" And then Baal Shem Tov says to him, "You want to understand this? You have to understand this to the previous incarnation of these spirits. In a previous reincarnation, the first man owed money to the second man, and the first man refused to pay. The second man didn't receive the money in this previous life. Now he just received the money because the first man came with the wallet and lost the money. The second finds the money and goes away. So the man say, "Okay, but what can I learn from the third man that it was a very poor man? He was beaten and taken to jail. Who is this man?" This is an important judge that during this previous reincarnation, he judged in favor of the first man for not paying the second man, although he knew that the second man has to right to receive the money. So this third man, he was the judge, and he was bribed to take an action that was not according to the justice. So now he had the atonement in his life, and he learned the value of the human justice in this world by being punished by this dolorous process that he lived. So we see and we understand that the reincarnation is very clear in the Judaism. And even if we go to the reincarnation on the times of Jesus, we will see that the Pharisees, they were reincarnationists. The Essenes, they were reincarnationists. And we just had a small group of Sadducees that they were not reincarnationists. And the Sadducees, they were a very powerful group of Jews that they denied the oral transmission of the law. So that's why they would deny the reincarnation. And they would be very powerful because they bought from the Roman Empire special special high priests and priests attributes on the whole temple. So they were not priests and high priests, but they would buy with their money these positions in the temple. And because they were in charge for the holy temple of Jerusalem in that times, we would see that the Jewish ruling council, they would be in a lower position in a political way of view because they were subordinated to the Sadducees, to the priests of the temple, and the Sadducees were in charge of the power with the Roman Empire. So, almost going to the end of our talk, we will see here a very important place in Gospels of John, chapter 3, where a Pharisee by the name of Nicodemus would come to Jesus, and he was a member of the Jewish ruling council. And because he was a member of the Jewish ruling council and he had so much touch with the Sadducees, and the Sadducees didn't allow to talk about reincarnation, he was not actually studying reincarnation and he was not in touch with this, although he was a master in Israel. So he comes to Jesus at night and he says, Jesus, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher and you come from God. For no one could perform the signs that you are doing if God were not with him. And Jesus will say to Nicodemus, very, very truly, I tell you, that no one can see the kingdom of God unless they are born again. And Nicodemus will ask, how can someone be born again when they are old? Surely they cannot enter a second time into their mother's womb to be born. And then Jesus will reply, very, very truly, I tell you, no one can enter in the kingdom of God unless they are born of water and spirit. Flesh gives birth to flesh, and spirit gives birth to spirit. You should be not surprised with my saying, you must be born again, said Jesus. And Jesus will say afterwards, you are a master in Israel and you ignore such things, because this was in the knowledge of the masters of Israel. And for a political option, he was not studying this and he was not aware of this, or he was just ignoring this. So we will see that the Spiritism will bring in the book Good News a very important talk among after this moment, because it will be told for us for the spirit of Humberto de Campos in the book Good News that there were two people with Jesus and Nicodemus, and they were Andrew and James. And they didn't understand about reincarnation because they were fishermen, they were farmers, they were not those who were in charge of studying. And they asked Jesus, and Jesus will say, why you are so surprised with this? Are you not aware that trees reborn after being pruned? With the human process is a little bit different, but the renew is always the same. For the human affairs, the body is a closing, and the individual owns it. All material close ends up tater. So, with the death of the body, we would fit another body, and this would be another close. And Jesus would explain for them that the process of reaching the perfection would be achieved only alongside to the rough roads. So we would see that Jesus would teach to them that the most important law of the book of Moses that would be in charge for the reincarnation, it would be the love of God, to love God with our heart, to love God with our strength and all our minds, and according to the law of love. We would find that reincarnation would not be paying an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, but actually we would find the base and the biggest law of the reincarnation as being the law that said to us Jesus that it was just the love, a good action that would cover multiple sins. So we understand, and we are almost finishing this. that the reincarnation on ancient times were very well known. It was actually on the basis of very important ancient civilizations, as we saw for the Egyptians, for the Greeks, and for the people of Israel. And we do understand that all this knowledge, that it's already written in our consciousness, and we look for studying this, we will understand why do we have pain in this life? Why do we have such a difficult and such a generous relationship with our family, with friends, and why do we have to develop ourselves through sometimes suffering, but especially for the strength and the will of achieving a much higher way, a much higher stage of evolution in our spiritual journey. So, the reincarnation in ancient times, we can understand that it's very well written and explained for many of these ancient civilizations.
Alvaro, thank you very much. I mean, it was a lot. It was very interesting. The journey that you provided to us, the review of the teachings from the ancient civilizations. Uh, I was very impressed with your comments about the Book of Dead. I mean, that was the way that the knowledge that the Egyptians had brought from that the most knowledge Egyptians, the initiated Egyptians brought from Capella. I mean, that was very interesting. We have several questions here, so let's dig into those. So Yasko, our friend Yasko, has sent this one to us. Hi, dear Alvaro. We see currently on Earth people in various degrees of moral standards. And when you say that in the present stage of planetary transition, some spirits will be forced to incarnate in more primitive worlds than ours, what factors will be taken into account in this selection?
This is a very important question. And what the higher spirits will say to us, what the spirits will say to us, according to the message of Allan Kardec, we will see that the good will of developing our spirit, it's the most important thing. So Allan Kardec will say to us that mostly the spirits that will be forced to go into incarnate in another primitive world are the spirits that will not get in the inner of their soul the will of development, the
Mhm.
will of going on in the moral wave of evolution of the planet. So it actually doesn't matter what you did in the past, in previous lives, incarnations. It doesn't matter. What it will matter, it's how is your stage and how is your will of evolution. If you have the will of evolution, the good will of evolution, and you want to learn from this moral wave of evolution, if you want to learn how to be a better person every day, it doesn't matter how what you did in the past, but what it will make that you still continues in this planet. It will be this good way of learning a spiritual life and this good way of understanding the spiritual life. Because there is something that it's very interesting in your question. Because when Emmanuel says to us that the Egyptians, they were the ones among these that had the much better knowledge of the spiritual world, and they were very well on the good deeds that they were trying to perform, we could ask, so what brought them to this planet? And actually what we will see, it was not the knowledge, because they had already this knowledge in their previous spiritual home. But now when they come to planet Earth, although they had the knowledge, they didn't have the goodwill of living the knowledge they have. So the knowledge is the key for liberation. But the living of love, it's actually the libertation of our spirit. So we have the key and we have the door. To open the door, we have to open our spirits to learn love and to live with love. Because these ancient Egyptians, for example, they had the knowledge, but they didn't have the good will of renewing their spirits in the previous planet that they were living. When they came to planet Earth and they understand what they did, so they started to think, whoa, now I need to put what I know in practice. So what we understand that will make that we will continue in this planet. It's not if you are going very fast or slowly on your evolution, spiritual evolution, but it's the good will that you are performing into your spirit to renew your spirit. So actually, this is a very interesting and a very good question.
It is interesting, right? Attitude is everything, right? You can know you can know so much, but if you don't put it in practice, it makes no difference. What's the next question here? Patricia De Hoyos. Alvaro, what's the most profound understanding we can have or achieve so far with what we have been revealed to us of the incarnation process through the divine laws of love, justice, and charity?
I didn't understand the question.
Oh,
Can you
sure.
explain?
Yeah. So pretty much, what is it that we can? What's the most profound or most important thing we can learn so far, but understand that has been revealed to us, and in light of the divine laws of love, justice, and charity.
This is also a very good question because when we see this story that I told about Baal Shem Tov, we will see that one guy made bad things to another guy, and then he's reincarnated, and someone will make bad things to him. This is the process of the atonement. So we could think, and this is the question of Andrew and James, that every time in planet Earth, we would have someone that would need to do something bad that the person would learn. And this is a infinite circle that we would not be away from this forever. So the most important law is what Jesus said in this talk that he writes to the mediumistic of Chico Xavier and the Humberto de Campos spirit in the book Good News. Why? Because what he's saying to us is that the most important thing is that only love covers a multitude of sins. So if we would have just a law with atonements, and the spirit would just need to atone and would not learn the love, we will always keep ourselves in this planet with the need of having so much bad persons making bad things to other people. But actually, what Jesus is teaching to us is that the love transforms the level and actually transform all the subject of the reincarnation. Because when you learn the love that God teaches to us, that Jesus explained it in his Gospels, you will be achieving a new level of consciousness. And you will understand that you can transform the world not by atonements, but for teaching other spirits and exemplifying this in your attitudes. And the attitudes that you will make on the goodness, this will change all the world. So we understand that the most important thing that we have to learn to change our reincarnation and to change the world we are living and to start the renewal of our spirit and to start the new a new era for our world it would be very important to learn how to love others. And we understand there are many levels of love. There are a person that will see a flower on the nature and he will take this flower from the nature and he will say, this is the symbol of love. My love to God, because I see God in this flower. But actually, he's taking out the flower that will be dead. And this is a level of love. But there is a second stage, a second way of understanding love, where you respect that God created. And many other people could pass through this way and see the love, the intellectual and love manifestation of God in the book of nature. And by this way, when you respect others in their evolution stage, and we understand that the love that actually we have to live should be free from the egoism of our human passion, we will understand that in the relations of one to the other, we will be closer, as the ancient Egyptians so told. We would be closer one to another to the respect of the problems, the difficulties of the others into our lives. And we would learn that living a higher love way that we wish to achieve in our deeds, in our words, in our thoughts, it's how we will transform this world. We transform ourselves. We exemplify this love into the acts and the words into this world. And through this, we will change not through atonements, but we will change things according to the love that will cover multiple sins.
Thank you. That is quite interesting. A very optimistic perspective. Thank you. Oh, Yasko. So, Yasko now has a follow-up question to the first question. So it is the intention to do better that matters, whether we will reincarnate here or go to a lower world.
It's the intention of living a life where we make good efforts with our goodwill to understand spirituality, and from understanding we go to the practice. So what I mean is, doesn't matter if you have many debits as spirit, if you are in a lower level, but if step by step you use the opportunities you have in your life to go on, and with small steps achieving the evolution of your spirit, it will make that you will stay in this planet on the wave of evolution, on planetary transition. But if you have a lot of knowledge, you are already someone that has a huge knowledge of the Spiritism, of the Gospels, of the Judaism, of the Bhagavad Gita for the Indians, for the Egyptian Book of Death, and you are really full of knowledge. But you're not having the goodwill of making small efforts every day. It will not keep you here. It will probably make that you will be among the civilizations in more primitive words that will help these words to evolve in a faster way. And by this incarnation in less evolved planets, it will make that we will learn the value of the efforts that only you can make. I cannot make the journey of the evolution for anyone, but I can make my journey of evolution. And through renewing my spirit, I will help those who are living with me, are working with me to see that there's a new way of understanding pain, suffering, that there's a new way of renewing myself, even though I had made the biggest mistakes of my life. I will teach those who are living with me, that renewing myself, it's a possible way, and it only depends on your own efforts. This evolution journey is made step by step, with small efforts every day, that without any doubt it doesn't start in our actions, but it will start in our thoughts. It will start in the good will of our hearts to be connected with God, to be connected with the higher helm spirits, to be connected with the goodness that is to be done into our world. And once my thoughts are deeply involved with the transformation of and the renewal of my soul, I will start doing good things. But first of all, I had to decide myself that I want to change the way I'm living or I was living. Second of all, I have to look for important and serious spiritual knowledge that we will find in the Spiritism. When I will look for the knowledge that I can find in Spiritism, in Gospels, in the Judaism, or wherever, it doesn't matter if you're not Spiritist. But if you go and you look for important knowledge of the spiritual world and serious knowledge, then you are ready to start renewing yourself and understanding what happens in your life and why it's happening in my life. And when I take the action and I become responsible for myself and for my pains and for my suffering and for my happiness, then I'm ready to go on in a renewal of my soul. And this for sure will make that it doesn't matter what you did. It doesn't matter if you made that your life or others' life becomes miserable. We are human beings, and all of us had made many mistakes that we wished today that we had not done them. What is the more important of the reincarnation and by the symbol of the Egyptians with the sunrise and the sunset, that we will have a new day to act in a completely different way that we probably did in the past. And if we see those around us that didn't yet had the, this new level of consciousness, we can pray for them and we can teach them for exemplifying this into our lives. And always the renewal of the word, it will come for the renewing of the spirits that are living in this world.
Thank you very much. Thank you for such an interesting lecture. Thank you for the very interesting and optimistic and positive, optimistic answers you've provided. Um, our time is almost up. And again, Alvaro, thank you very much. Great lecture. I did learn a lot. And just as a reminder, again, next week we're gonna be back with our series of lectures. Next time we're gonna have Al Turi. He's going to be talking to us about without charity there is no salvation. And again, just as a reminder, the 15th Spiritist Symposium, the 16th Spiritist Symposium is coming up November 5th in Houston, Texas. And make sure you register with your family to celebrate with us 25 years of the U.S. Spiritist Federation. Again, Alvaro, thank you very much. And could you be so kind to say the final prayer for us?
Yes, I will try. And I will ask those who feel comfortable to close their eyes. In some point of our lives, to try to connect ourselves and to make the efforts to receive the blessing of God, of being in touch with the Spiritism, and to understand a little bit more every day from the spiritual world, and to understand how we are deeply involved with our thoughts, and how we come to this world with the possibilities of renewing ourselves and the possibilities of learning through the good will of serving Jesus and to serve God. We could learn how to achieve this new level of consciousness and to bring into our lives the real changes of our inner spirit. And should each and every one of us to be brave enough to discover inside ourselves a new man, a new woman that will help to work in those days that all of us are called from the spirits to work on times of transition, planetary transition in this world, to work for the good, to work for the spirits that are always here to support ourselves whenever we are ready for laboring into the inner of our spirits and to renew ourselves in acts and words of goodness in this world. I thank you very much for this opportunity, and Amen.